Magic is a force that has always existed within the world of Remnant. In the first generation of humans, it was widespread. Everyone had magic, and honestly, they took it a bit for granted, hence why it was taken away. But when humanity returned in its second generation, magic was something of fairy tale. It was something that no longer existed in the world, except we now know in certain cases, such as Salem and Ozpin and the Maidens, magic still does exist. Yet, I also believe magic exists in the general populace. However, it is only a semblance of the power that humanity once held. Semblance itself is a form of magic, however, it's dulled down to the point where people don't actually consider it magic, they just consider it part of who they are. Magic, semblance being an extension of one's soul, etc. And in my last video, where I discussed about Weiss's semblance and her connection to the Winter Maiden, I discussed the concept of magic being inherited. And I want to give a more concrete definition, or at least a better explanation of what I mean by that. So first, let's consider what the first existence or first generation of humanity was like. Now, if we consider each of them having what I would say is 100% of the potential of magic, then those people, if two people with 100% potential for magic had a child, that child too would have an equivalent amount of magic. It makes sense. Everyone had magic back then, etc. The genetics of the parents are allowing the child to be born with an equivalent amount of magic. They are not actually passing on their magic, if that makes sense. Now, we know that this holds true even once humanity was first wiped out. Salem still existed, she still had the same magic and potential that she had back in the first generation. Ozma was reincarnated into a, we don't actually know the name of the person or anything like that, so we'll just say a random person, and when he and Salem then had a child, or multiple children, those children, too, also possessed 100% potential for magic. At least as far as we know, it could have been dulled down. We aren't 100% sure. However, Salem had 100% potential. Ozpin, or Ozma's soul, had 100% potential, although the body in which he was inhabiting did not originally have magic. And yet, magic was still born within the children that they had. So it is not that they themselves, again, passed on their magic, it's that their genetics allowed magic to be born within the child. However, Ozma's genetics didn't have magic initially. So there's something to do with creating new life in the world of RWBY, in the world of Remnant, that involves the soul. That, since magic is bonded to the soul, something of that is involved with creating the soul of the new person. If that kind of makes sense, that's how I kind of understand it. So these cases, or these two cases that I've discussed, are all with having children between two people who have full potential for magic. But what would happen if someone who doesn't have the full potential for magic, such as a maiden who is supposed to only have a portion of Ozma's original magic, in theory at least. If it's Ozma's original daughter, then it's different, but we'll say it's a portion of Ozma's magic compared to what Ozma's magic was as a whole. So we'll say that a maiden has 25% of the potential of magic, and the maiden, in my previous video, I used Willow Schnee as the example, had a child with Jacques Schnee, who has no potential for magic, but is a regular human that has the potential for semblance. Well, if those two have a child, then the child's genetics is going to allow for them to have a semblance. But with that semblance, since it is an aspect of magic, can be enhanced by the magic. So if the maiden has 25% potential, Jacques has 0% potential, let's just say, for magic as a whole, then the child itself might have like 12.5 or something along those lines. Will have a stronger semblance, it'll be enhanced by magic, than compared to other people of the general population. Now, if we go further back and consider that Ozma in his previous reincarnations still had 100% potential for magic attached to his soul, and as he went through these reincarnations, if he was to, say, have a child in any of those incarnations, well, how exactly would magic manifest in those cases? Because you'd have Ozma with 100% potential, having a child with someone who has no potential for magic, other than semblance, of course. I'm considering just semblance as base 0 for magic itself. Then the child would have some combination of the two, and semblance might be made a little bit too powerful. It might be a little bit too much resembling magic. So maybe magic would start resulting in different traits that would happen within humanity. Perhaps the origins of the Silver Eyes. We know for a fact that we saw in the Lost Fable that in one incarnation of Ozma, both of his children had silver eyes, and yet neither parent did. So where did those silver eyes come from? We know that it is a genetic trait, considering Summer had silver eyes, and thus so does Ruby, and with Maria, her mother had silver eyes as well, and thus Maria was born with silver eyes. So we know that silver eyes is a genetic trait, and that it must have started at Ozpin. Some genetic mutation must have happened for Ozpin's reincarnation and the wife that he chose to have children that had silver eyes. Now I'm assuming that Ozma's wife, did not have any potential for magic, and yet the children were born with these silver eyes. And the silver eyes, as we also know from the Lost Fable, Maria theorized that they are a gift from the god of light, that they are similar to the god of light. But I actually don't think that they came from the god of light itself, or himself, itself. Do they identify male, female? They were identified as brothers in the show, but they are technically ethereal beings. I don't know, I'm not going to get into all that. However, I don't think it was something intentional that the god of light created. Ozma's reincarnation ability to, when he dies, reincarnate in someone else, is a gift given to him by the god of light. It's a magical property that was given to him. So I believe that when Ozma's incarnation, or Ozpin's incarnation at that time, had a child, that the magic was passed on and manifested itself in the form of the Silver Eyes. And since Ozma's soul has some attachment to the god of light, that is where those Silver Eyes manifested from. That is where their resemblance to the god of light came from. Some of the magic that is attached to Ozma's soul because of the god of light transferred into them. Now, this has been very wordy overall, so hopefully this makes sense that magic can be inherited in different levels depending on the overall levels that the parents have. At full potential, their child will just have full potential and range over magic. But a maiden, if they have a child when they have the magic of a maiden, and of course they'd be having a child with someone who doesn't have magic, in most instances, unless there's some instances where Ozma may have had a child with one of the maidens in the past, then that's a completely different story. But a maiden having a child with someone without magic would have a child that has a stronger semblance, or a stronger version of the magic that they are already going to be born with. And also the magic would make it more consistent. In other words, a hereditary semblance, such as the glyphs and summoning that the Schnee family is known for, or at least Weiss and Winter so far. And then when you get increasing amounts of magic, maybe it'll manifest itself in different forms, such as the Silver Eyes, and that creates a new genetic trait within humanity that is then passed on. This has been very, very wordy, as I've said, so hopefully this kind of makes sense to you all. But with that, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below as to, first of all, if I made sense talking throughout this video, because it felt a little bit rambly as I was talking, but it kind of made sense in my head, so let me know that. But let me know if you think it makes sense that magic is inherited in different fractions depending on the amount of magic that the parents actually have. Do you think that the Silver Eyes origin did come actually from Ozma as a result of his magic and also the attachment he has to the god of light? Do you think it also makes sense that semblance could also be enhanced, made stronger, made hereditary by magic being inherited? And with that also being said, do you think there are other instances that we will run into in the RWBY series of people having stronger semblances or potentially other magical traits that may have come from a previous incarnation of a maiden having a child? Or maybe Ozma had some other children along the way as well, but I think that Ozma having other children would have still resulted in more genetic lines of the Silver Eyes. And one thing I also want to point out, just because Ozma had a child that had Silver Eyes, and in this theory, all Silver Eyes would have been descended from one incarnation of Ozma or another, it does not mean that they are actually genetically related. Ozma's magic is only bound to his soul, and thus somehow magic is transferred to a child. It does not mean, like, the person that the Ozma's soul reincarnates into is still genetically unique. Every person that Ozma reincarnates into is not genetically the same. Therefore, if RWBY is descended from a reincarnation of Ozma due to her Silver Eyes, that does not mean she's similar in any way, genetically speaking, to Oscar. So Rose Garden shippers can still, there's still hope for it. It's not that genetically it's just gonna be no, but it could just be no because Ozma's in Oscar's head, that type of thing still. But if Ozma leaves, there's still hope for Rose Garden, etc. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And yeah, if you like this video and want to see more, make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.